Hey everyone, Mike Eddy here again today, and this is part 3 of the four-headed fatted calf of the IFB movement. And the reason why I call it the four-headed fatted calf is these issues that we're discussing, music, personal separation, and the last two, which one of them is coming today, these are issues that have become borderline idolatry. In other words, they've been lifted to a level where they should not be, and they've replaced Christ. And so, anyway, today, for part 3 of the four-headed fatted calf, is the man of God, the MOG. And I want to deal with this issue because it's so important. And the reason why it's so important is the book of Colossians makes it very clear that in the New Testament, in this age that we live, the church age, that there is one head to the body of the church, and his name is Christ. And he is to have the preeminence in all things. He's had the preeminence in the church. And what we have allowed is we've allowed men to be elevated to a level they should have never been elevated to. And a lot of it goes to this infatuation with some preachers from about the 1950s on. And these guys who started the independent fundamental Baptist movement and became heroes because they left the Southern Baptist Convention or what have you, and somehow they have been placed at a level that is just unhealthy. It's not good. I've heard in my lifetime when I was younger, people say about, let's say, Jack Hiles, he's the captain of our team. Things like that are just really bad. I've heard preachers talk about, referring to other preachers, that they want a double portion of their spirit, like Elijah and Elisha. This is very dangerous because we've elevated men to a level where Christ is not the preeminent one. It's these men. And they'll say, oh, we preach Christ. Yes, but they adore these men, and you can't say anything negative about them, and they spend messages talking about it. There's conferences right now called Passing the Mantle Conference. Who are you passing it from and to? We have Christ here. What are you doing? And so they take these passages from the Old Testament and they equate the New Testament church with things in the Old Testament, for instance, like Moses and Joshua, and they'll say that guy is our Moses and I'm his Joshua or whatever, and they'll look at passages where clearly God had Moses in between God and the children of Israel to lead them out of Egypt and into the promised land. And I get that, but understand that God was leading the children of Israel like he was actually leading. They did not have the whole Bible. And so, that's different than the New Testament church. You can't over here say, well, they complained against Moses and look what happened, or you're not allowed to say anything against that. You can't do that. You can't correlate that to the New Testament church because Christ is the head of the New Testament church, not a man. They'll talk about Elijah or Elisha and don't criticize the man of God or anything like that, or the man of God's going to call down fire from heaven, or talking about doing whatever the man of God tells you to do it, because that's what they did with Elijah and Elisha. Okay, but you have to understand, these were prophets of God. These people did not have God's complete word, and so God was literally telling these prophets what to tell the people as if it was God's own words, and it was God's own words, because they didn't have the complete word of God. And you have to understand that not every dispensation of Scripture is the same. And where we are living now is different than what it was back in Genesis or in Kings or what have you. And you talk about David with Saul, and touch not God's anointed. And so they'll say you can't touch God's anointed, and they're a man of God. But yet they will say that if a preacher is not an independent fundamental Baptist preacher, that you can criticize him, It's only like there's only men of God who are independent fundamental Baptists. Those are the true men of God. And talking about 7,000 not bowed their knee to Baal, and they'll say we're the last ones, and just be very leery of it when people start thinking that you're the last ones who are true believers, and we're the only ones that are true believers, and all the rest are just afterthoughts, or they're second class Christians or whatever. It's very scary. And I would just challenge you, because I'm telling you, I heard a preacher say that his pastor wouldn't let him have a beard. He was on staff. His pastor wouldn't let him have a beard. And you got guys who are preaching about having, you shouldn't have a beard. You should shave every day and shine your shoes and all this stuff, and how you look and how you dress, and to look like a man of God. I don't see anywhere where Christ dressed fancy. I don't see anywhere, or certainly not John the Baptist, right, who preached of Christ. I don't see that in even in the Old Testament a lot. Or they'll say, well, the Old Testament priests wore the priest garments, and so that's why you should wear a suit and a tie. It's like, okay, we have a high priest now. His name's Christ, and it's called priesthood of the believer, right? I mean, that's supposedly one of our doctrines that we believe. And so what I would challenge you is this notion of, well, you can't question the man of God, you can't say anything against the man of God because of this over here in the Old Testament or what have you. And it's just wrong. Now, should we honor those who are following Christ, who are leading us to the Lord and helping us along our walk? Yes, absolutely. Should we obey those who God has put in our life, and as they are following God? As long as they're following God and teaching us the scriptures, yes, we should obey what they're saying, but what they're saying should be the scriptures. And people say, pastors will say, well, it's my church, it's my people. No, it's God's church, it's his people. And Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. So we're his sheep, and we follow Christ. And I mean, Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And so I would just be very careful about even using those terms. Oh, these are my people, or these are, they're not your people. They're God's people, and you don't own them. And there's this idea that somehow these pastors are up here and these preachers are up here, and the lay people are down here. We're all level at the cross. All of us are level at the cross. You're no better. If you're a preacher and you preach nationally, you're no better than anybody in your church. You're no more important to God than anybody in your church. You count it a privilege and an honor if God puts us in the ministry, but it ought to be such a humility thing that, God, I don't deserve to be in this, but I'll do what I can to help lead your people to you and love them and nurture them, right? And so anyway, this is a big deal. This is a problem, and it creates a really bad environment where these men can just do and say whatever they want. You're not allowed to question them, and it can create abusive situations and everything else. Look, as you're going through this, if you're in a church like this where it's the man of God, I'd be asking questions. I'd be pushing back and saying, no, this is not right. It should be about Christ. It shouldn't be about him. And by the way, show me in the New Testament where there's one pastor of a church. Show it to me. It's not there. It talks about elders, plural. The apostles, there were 12 of them. And even if you say, well, but they weren't all in charge. We had Peter, James, and John. I mean, you never see one pastor of a church. And there's this thing of pastor-led church. Well, he's the man of God. No, it should be a Christ-led church. And I'm telling you, don't be afraid of these guys who are trying to bully people around to do whatever they want done so they can have their meetings and their love offerings and everything else. You follow Christ. And if your pastor will not budge on this, then it may be time to find a new church. And if you're a pastor, you need to understand that you're no better than anybody in your church. You need to understand that Jesus died for them as much as he died for you, and that he is the head of the body, not you. You're not the head of the body. You may think that you are, but you're not. And you wonder why people keep leaving. You wonder why things are falling apart. It's because you think you're in charge. And I would just encourage everybody to go back to Christ. He is the head of the body. On all things, he might have the preeminence. And let's follow him. Let's get back to Christ, not the men. I don't care about those guys who died 60, 70 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, who paved some way. Any good thing that has happened is because of the Lord. Let's talk about him. And I want to talk about, if you're going to a conference and they're talking about Jack Hyles, Lee Robertson, Tom Malone, all these, Curtis Hudson, all these different things, and you preachers that are out there that have blogs that talk constantly about old preachers and like you're trying to keep them alive and passing on what they did to another generation. You need to pass on Jesus Christ. That's who you need to be pointing people to, because he's the only reason why we have anything in this life, and he's the only reason why we have a church, and he's supposed to be the head of the church, not one person or other people. So that's it for today. Part 4 is coming.